What would you do if one sunny day, a bunch of tattooed thugs showed up at your house looking for your adorable daughter? That is the situation this man is facing. Before he could even negotiate, they started firing shots at his trailer and rammed it down. Although he and his daughter managed to escape to another place, they still could not shake off their pursuers. What did his daughter do to get them both in this mess? What will the man do to protect his daughter from these crazed attackers? Join us as we dive into the 2016 film titled Blood Father. John is a recently released inmate after spending 9 years behind bars. Even though he is out of prison, he is still under government supervision, and any misstep, no matter how minor, could send him back to a never-ending cycle of incarceration. After all those years of reflection behind bars, John has become a responsible man. He now runs a small tattoo parlor that he owns and operates himself. The parlor is also his home, an old trailer. It may not be grand, but it provides him with a place to call his own. Few people know he was once a notorious motorcycle rider in the area. He was part of a gang and often carried out heists on his bike. However, after getting out of prison with nothing, he gave up his passion. His biggest asset now is a beat-up car inherited from his father-in-law. Speaking of family, aside from his wife, who spent money recklessly and left him for someone else while he was in prison, John has a daughter named Lydia. Lydia is a beautiful, strong-willed girl who, lacking parental love, has gone down a reckless path. She frequently hangs out with criminals and has become the girlfriend of a gang leader, who often drags her into his wild escapades. While John still thinks of his daughter as a little girl, he has avoided seeing her since his release from prison to spare her the stigma of having a convict for a father. One day, he gets a call from an unknown number, and it's Lydia on the line. She speaks anxiously, asking for money to get by. Once she makes the request, John does not hesitate to help. Although he presses for details, Lydia remains silent. Worried for her safety, he drives to pick her up. After years apart, Lydia does not recognize her father, but John has always kept tabs on her and knows about the trouble she has been in with her friends. However, with everything he has done, John feels he does not deserve to be a father. After bringing his daughter back to his makeshift home, he realizes Lydia is nothing like the girl he once knew. Not only does she drink and do drugs, but he also discovers a gun in her backpack. This is beyond John's imagination. His daughter has become this way due to Jonah, her boyfriend. He has lured her into a life of addiction and made her dependent on him. Since Lydia arrived, she has not left John's sight for a moment. He closely watches her struggle with addiction, noticing how often she needs to get high. Just by looking at her, he can tell when she has just used drugs. This frustrates him because, despite throwing away all the drugs, she still hides some for secret use. John realizes her departure from her mother is not the only issue. She is constantly anxious and pressures him for money to escape. After some questioning, Lydia finally reveals that a group is pursuing her. A few days ago, Jonah lured Lydia into a job. To avoid complications, they asked her to buy bullets. Then, they went to a house rented by a couple Jonah suspected of stealing from him. He drugged Lydia to give her the courage to participate. Her job was to guard the back door and not let anyone escape. In the yard, children spotted Lydia with a gun. Suddenly, gunshots rang out, causing everyone to flee in panic. Lydia peeked in and saw a man bleeding out while Jonah threatened his wife. The woman innocently told Lydia to run, unaware they were accomplices. After searching the house without finding anything, Jonah forced Lydia to kill the woman to prove her loyalty, claiming they deserved it for taking his money. He promised she could keep working with him if she complied. However, Lydia was a good-hearted girl, not a killer. In a panic, she accidentally pointed the gun at Jonah and pulled the trigger out of fear, then ran to seek help from her father. She knew Jonah was the grandson of a mafia boss called El Padrino, and his henchmen would not let her go easily. After hearing the story, John could not believe his daughter was in such trouble. Unsure what to do, he called his sponsor, Kirby. The friend advised him to take Lydia to the police and help her get clean. But before John could think it over, several tattooed thugs showed up that night looking for trouble. They claimed to want tattoos, but John refused since the shop was closed. In contrast to John's serious demeanor, the thugs were joking around. He looked straight at them and said, "Do I look like I am joking?" Recognizing their tattoos, he knew which gang they belonged to. Fresh out of prison, he avoided trouble, letting them act tough. When they claimed to be looking for Lydia, he said she was not there and tried to close the door, but they charged in, wrecking his tattoo parlor. John was furious. He pulled out his daughter's gun and fired a few shots to scare them off. To his surprise, the thugs fired back with their submachine guns. His makeshift home was riddled with holes. John had no choice but to crawl on the floor, shielding his daughter with his body. The gang outside rammed their SUV into his trailer, flipping it onto its side. Fortunately, his sponsor, Kirby, along with many of the other residents of the trailer park arrive with shotguns in hand. Faced with the determination of the old man, the thugs reluctantly left, filled with resentment. Once outside, John decided to flee with his daughter. Despite being under surveillance, he could not abandon her. They hopped into his old clunker and headed for the border, where he knew someone who could help. They stopped at a motel for the night before continuing their journey. Initially, John suspected the motel receptionist of having bad intentions toward Lydia, so he threatened him. That night, feeling uneasy, Lydia approached the receptionist and learned he was interested due to a wanted poster. The police had linked her to a recent murder case and were searching for her. Though the receptionist did not report Lydia, he had seen her wanted photo, revealing their location had been compromised. Seeing the police arrive, the receptionist kindly arranged another room for them to hide in. But when the police entered the room they had just vacated, gunshots rang out. 2 officers were shot by a hitman known for targeting cops and judges. Realizing the danger, John looked for a way to escape. He smashed a car window and used his lockpicking skills to steal the car. Feeling clumsy after not being active for a while, he struggled as Lydia shouted loudly while the hitman approached. In that desperate moment, John finally unlocked the car. He quickly reversed the car to scare off the hitman before he could fire at them again. In the end, the hitman could only watch in frustration as the father and daughter escaped. After evading the assassin, John and Lydia boarded a truck carrying refugees to cross the border. John hoped to find an old acquaintance who owed him a favor but had no idea where to look after so long in prison. At the bar, some big guys gave him menacing looks. When John struggled to get information, Lydia stepped in, charmingly engaging them and quickly finding out where John's contact was. The person is a gun smuggler named Preacher who supplies the gangs at the border. The first person John sees is Preacher's wife, sitting outside in the sun. She thinks she is seeing a ghost, believing John died in prison. Even Preacher, now old and forgetful, is surprised to see him. After hearing John's brief explanation, he understands the father and daughter's situation. John states he needs his bike and money to leave, but Preacher insists on keeping him to meet some old acquaintances. It turned out that Preacher was once the owner of a motorcycle club, and John was a member of his gang. Watching the reckless youths perform stunts outside, Lydia began to understand her father's heroic past. From Preacher's words, she also learned how terrible her mother had been. Despite being in prison, John provided for her upbringing. He took the fall for an old man during a job, staying silent behind bars while that man promised to support his family. John had once owned a motorcycle, which he considered his pride and joy. The next morning, before John could even wake up, a gun was pressed to his head. The old man had discovered that Lydia was wanted. El Padrino's gang had put a $30,000 bounty on her. A greedy man like him would never let such a lucrative opportunity slip away, even after years of friendship with John. Originally, John just wanted to reclaim his bike and the money that was rightfully his, but now it had become a tool for someone else's gain. Furious, he knocked out the old man's wife and grabbed her gun. In the past, he would have shot the ungrateful old man without hesitation, but for his daughter's sake, he had changed and could not return to his violent ways. John searched the old man's drawer for the car keys and some cash before leaving. Soon after, Preacher's goons started chasing them, but they were no match for John, a seasoned racer and multiple champion. He shot one of them just as he was about to close in. The next guy thought he had dodged the bullet, but his fate turned out to be even worse. To avoid being tracked, John decided to shave off the beard he had kept for years, while Lydia dyed her hair to avoid recognition. Looking at Lydia, John could see her growing more anxious. She often received threatening messages from strangers, so much that she hesitated to even open them. At times, she considered ending her life to spare others from danger. However, John used his life experience to help her understand the value of life. He shared how his passion for speed had almost cost him his life multiple times. Yet, after each near-death experience, he realized he had never truly appreciated his life. It was only by surviving that he began to see that life was not as bad as he had thought. John said he needed to meet an old acquaintance from his time behind bars. Having changed his appearance, he easily passed through security to enter the prison. While incarcerated, he had befriended Arturo, a crime boss whose power rivaled that of El Padrino. Now, Arturo not only controlled his outside empire but also held sway over the prison guards. So, when John asked for help because Lydia was in trouble, Arturo agreed immediately. Arturo knew Jonah's claim about killing the couple renting from him was just an excuse. The real reason was that Jonah had stolen money from El Padrino. When the truth emerged, Jonah blamed the couple. Lydia's connection to Jonah made her a target because El Padrino had yet to recover the stolen money. The crime boss in prison could not help John since they were enemies of El Padrino. He advised John to negotiate with El Padrino and emphasized the importance of teaching his daughter survival skills in this world, as it was the only way he could help her right now. When John got out of prison, he noticed a missed call from his daughter. He immediately called back, but a man answered. It turns out that while John was away, Lydia had received a call from Kirby, who warned her that she was being watched and advised her to avoid being alone. However, while waiting for John at a movie theater, Lydia received another call from Kirby's number, but this time it was a different voice. Jonah was still alive, despite being shot in the throat by Lydia. He remembered this grudge, as the scar would never heal. Jonah intended to capture Lydia and pin the theft of the money on her. She planned to escape in the crowd, but they had already set a trap to catch her. Kirby was forced to betray him. After he was no longer useful, Jonah killed him on the spot. At this moment, Jonah was unaware that John had him in a tight situation. John threatened to go to El Padrino and reveal everything if Jonah harmed a hair on Lydia. If he was smart, he could meet John to negotiate. With no other options, Jonah reluctantly agreed to follow John's terms. Before meeting Jonah, John knew they would not allow him any advantage, so he needed to prepare. He went to the treacherous old man's house to find some weapons. However, Preacher insulted John, prompting him to kill the old man on the spot. Afterward, John confidently rode his motorcycle to the meeting point with Jonah. He planted a landmine against his bike, ensuring that if it was moved, the mine would detonate. To guarantee his compliance, Jonah's men stripped John of any weapons and placed him in the back seat of the SUV with Lydia. With John's bike blocking their path, they were forced to clear it before proceeding. When John signaled his daughter to duck, a henchman touched the bike and was instantly blown to pieces. Taking advantage of the distraction, John fought with Jonah and another member of his gang in the SUV. John managed to grab the gun from the guy next to him and shot Jonah, wounding him. He knocked out the last henchman with a brutal strike and then shot him in the throat. However, Jonah and another hitman were still alive and hiding, taking shots at John from cover. Despite being hit, John remained focused and instructed Lydia to go ahead while he provided cover fire. She refused to leave him behind, so they decided to stick together. John used the moment to retaliate against the hitman, but he took a few more bullets in return. Seeing this, Lydia drove the car to shield him, feeling the fear of losing her father like never before. Despite his injuries, John knew the hitman would not give up easily. When the hitman approached, John pulled the trigger, but the hitman shot him one last time, leaving him in critical condition. In his final moments, John wanted his daughter by his side to memorize her face. Lydia expressed her wish to return to their trailer and live with him there. This was the most comforting thing John had longed to hear, but he knew he would never get the chance to make it a reality. As for Jonah, after fleeing, he was caught by the police and ended up in the same prison where John had once been. Arturo stated that if anyone from El Padrino's gang showed up, that person's life would be over. The film ends with Lydia sitting and talking to John's neighbors. She expresses her gratitude to her father for allowing her to continue living her life. She emphasizes the importance of valuing oneself and those around us, as life offers many beautiful things beyond what we might think. So that was all about the movie. Let us know what you guys think in the comments below and do subscribe to our channel to view more of our amazing movie recaps. Hit the bell icon to receive instant notifications from us. See you all next time.